Welcome to ZOOMERTIMES TV. And here's your host, Anita Finley.
Hello, everybody. This is a unique interview. As you all know, I'm Anita Finley, and I am the ZOOMERTIMES host for many of the ZOOMERTIMES interviews. And it's amazing the books that we're able to attract and put into Boomer Times. Some are pretty general. There are a lot of very good novels and there are a lot of biographies, but I was very, very fortunate to have something called Mistress Miao. And it is all about, well, let me just not tell you what it's about yet. Let me introduce the author, he actually was with us a few years ago, but this is his book, and he is someone who is so special in my life. His name is Yun Rou. It's Monk Yun Rou, excuse me, Monk Yun Rou. And he writes books that are really the Taoist information. If you don't know what Tao is, then you have to look that up. But all I can tell you is after this interview, you will be so impressed with having someone of his intellectual ability, his travels, what he's done, what makes him a monk. It's really an amazing thing. So I certainly hope that you will listen and you will take it all in, because I always feel privileged, and I know you will too. So welcome to our show, Monk. I know that was a long introduction, but I feel so, I almost feel wordless when you're around, and that's not common for me. So let's see. I don't see you on the screen, and I'm not sure if he's still here, but we can get started talking. If his audio is on, we can do that. So let's just talk about this. Monk Yun Rou. Tell me how you do all this writing. Where do you get all this information from?
Well, I think I was born a seeker and a storyteller, and I don't know that there is a way to describe the creative and spiritual wellspring that drives any novelist or storyteller, other than to say that it's a combination of energy from the ether and and neurotransmitters. It's a mind thing. As far as the travel, I am an itinerant soul, and I like to move around. And I especially enjoy traveling in Asia. In recent years, the rise of an autocratic regime in China and rough spots between our two countries have constrained my travel there, and I'm very sad about that. I have many friends there that I miss sorely, but I don't feel comfortable, partly because I am very forthright in my discussions of the transgressions of that regime in my newsletter and elsewhere and in interviews like this. So I'm sure that they're not too pleased with me right now. But I do manage to go to other places in Asia. And I always do that when I'm writing books that are set in Asia, because that gives me sort of the feel and the inspiration for that process.
Well, may I just call you Monk, or do I have to call you the whole name?
No, Monk is fine.
Okay.
Fine.
So Monk, and I'm putting this book up for everybody to see. This is I would call it a rare book. It's actually two books in one. And when I first started reading it, I didn't realize that. And that's what really put me on kind of like a kaleidoscope in a sense. I equated to a Rubik cube. I had to try to figure out what was going on and fit everything in a certain place. So what made you write the Mistress Miao the way you did? It's rare. It's unusual.
So there are other authors. I can't claim to be the first by any means. David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. I think it's David. Uh, Cloud Atlas is a famous book that takes place in many different time frames and was woven together in a film, which had mixed critical success, but I thought was wonderful. And I loved the book. There are other writers who jump back and forth in time, and there are other people who do parallel stories that give the reader some kind of satisfaction when they begin to understand the interweaving of the two threads, and hopefully at the end very satisfying resolution of those two threads. But in my case, I think that part of it is that I am a Gemini and I have an attention span deficit, and my mind is always hopping around, and I'm comfy thinking of more than one thing at the same time, but not like a multitasker, because as we know, all of us know, multitasking, which came upon us from the digital world, is just a term for doing a number of things at the same time poorly. I hope I don't do these poorly because, of course, when I write, I'm not writing at the same
You need
time.
to talk a little bit louder. We're losing you.
Okay, so I'm not
Okay.
writing. I'm not writing these threads at the same time, but they are woven into the book so that you jump from one to the other every chapter. And I think that the reason I applied this writing technique to this book, this story, is that when I'm writing about Asian themes and historical occurrences, because Mistress Miao is based on an historical figure, I'll talk more about that in a moment. But when I weave them together, I want the books to be more than just an historical foray. I want to make them gritty and relevant and tactile and sensual and important for the modern reader. So, by bringing these characters or their descendants into the modern world, I connect the ancient and the modern in a way that reminds me very much of a lot of my own monkish studies, whether they are in the physical martial arts of China or in the philosophy of Taoism, which, by the way, our listeners will know, even though they don't know that they know, because anyone who has seen a Star Wars movie, and that franchise is so overwhelmingly popular that it's hard to imagine people haven't, you know that the rebels are Taoists living in the forests in bacchanalian fashion. And their adversaries, the empire, are the Confucianists, who the historical Taoists set themselves in apposition to, if not opposition to. And so one side of this coin is structure and government and rules and regulations, and the other side is free inquiry into the ways of nature. So the Jedi Knights were Taoists, and the Jedi Masters, like Yoda, were Taoist masters. And many years ago, I had a student who was very into Star Wars, and my young son at the time was also into building Legos and watching Star Wars movies. So I took them to lunch together so they could meet.
Then I'm sure that you love The Big Bang Theory. I watch it. That's really quite a film, isn't it? But I want to get into the story. I love the love story. That was extraordinary for someone. Great. And of course, I knew that she was a woman, no matter what.
The modern story about the woman whose husband works to save her from a dire medical situation, let's say the result of some violence. I don't want to go ruin it by saying any more, but his dedication to her was inspired by an experience I had myself.
Ah.
So earlier in my life, my wife was involved in my then wife was involved in a terrible car accident, which happened right in front of me. And she was comatose and left for dead for a long time. And I did everything I could to bring her back. So without dwelling on that too much, let me just say that the uh, the fictional recounting of the emotion of wanting to stay with somebody even when they're not there was
Yeah.
something I was familiar with.
But in my experience in gerontology and with older adults, I always tell people, do not say anything when someone's in a coma that you wouldn't say if they were not, because one does not know what they're hearing or what's happening. And so I think his love was very important for her with everything. But let's move away. I wanted to go into the into the ancient history. When did you start to that you loved ancient history, Chinese or Asian history? Was as a kid? Were you drawing things like that?
So I was drawn to that kind of Asian exotica, meaning the philosophy and different way of looking at life and at the world from an early age. And I was born into a Jewish family in New York City. And I would say that if the Jewish community into which I was drawn at that time had been maybe not immediately post Holocaust, because I was only about 10 years out from the end of World War II when I was born. But also,
Explain what that means.
my mother was a philosophy major. She was a follower of the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, and she had quite a good library of philosophy books. And about the age of 12, I began to explore them. And of course, I was reading these arcane texts, things like the Taoist, the Tao Te Ching and the Zhuangzi. And I read some Zen stuff too, some Japanese material, which was a little bit more accessible,
Mhm.
but not much. Um, and at that tender age, I had a sense that there was something for me there. I couldn't understand those texts, difficult enough to understand them now when I'm quite familiar and teach them, but there's still elements of mystery and mysticism and beauty to them. And I think that mystery is important. I think that sense and feeling of something slightly other and slightly special and slightly opaque makes the material more compelling on an emotional level. It makes us quest to really understand it deeper. So there was something there then for me, and there's something there now for me. And of course, the way of looking at the world that is portrayed in these philosophies is very, very different from an Abrahamic worldview. And I have taken, I'm afraid, rather a dim view of the Abrahamic take on things only because I've seen the state of our world and what believing in those things has done to us, pitting us against each other and against planet Earth in a way that I find tragic and troubling.
So the UFO situation is something I'm sure on your mind too. And
I'm fascinated by that, of course.
right.
And, I have lost, as we have continued our population growth and continue to willfully and systematically destroy this planet and our natural world, there is a little piece of me that has lost faith that we will be able to pull ourselves out of this, particularly by using technology. And so I'm hoping for either an evolutionary leap, which leaves us all in a different spiritual place to regard each other and the world differently than we do, or the intervention of superior aliens who just come in and say, all right, enough of that. Stop. Let us help you and put you on the right track before you destroy yourselves. So in that context, I'm a little bit hopeful and fascinated by all the UFO talk that's going on now and the studies being released and all that.
I'm so glad you said that. I feel so similar to you. I remember one of the first books because I've loved space and science fiction, but A Stranger in a Strange Land was a very important book for me.
Fantastic book.
Was a fantastic. It's Heinlein, wasn't it? If I'm not mistaken,
Was
wrote
Heinlein.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
That really opened up my eyes that someone could be non-existent but really existent. So I realized at that point that there are other things that could be, and we just have not. As much as we think we're so smart, we really aren't smart. We're probably
Well,
1%.
you're hitting the nail on the head with this. Earlier, I said that I had taken issue with the Abrahamic take on it, and specifically what I mean on it being humankind, life, God, all that. Specifically, the troublesome part is that it's all about us, and that the world was made for us to use as our toilet, as our playground, to do with what as we will, and that all the other sentient beings on the planet, that is from ants and flies to whales, who are self-aware, who have emotion, who have a sense of family, who have a sense of their own life. They may not have technology and sophisticated ways of seeing or expressing these things, although really, frankly, we don't know. Probably more of that than we give them credit for. But the idea that we would take this enormous superorganism, so rich and intricate and fantastic, and treat it like the town dump because we have some mythology and fiction. And all these religious texts are all fiction, including the Taoist ones. Um, we use fiction to teach lessons, and fiction and story are the way our brain works. So it's only perfectly normal for us to make legends and myths out of the important principles we want to share and remember. That's just being human. All we do is tell story every day. This is just bigger, better stories with more important messages. But that one message that it's all here for us has proven to be disastrous.
You're such a philosopher. I love talking with you, and I wanted to get back to Mistress Miao because if when you read this book, and I just have to say this, you will get a lot of Monk's philosophy in it, and it'll be a privilege to read it. It's so well written, it is so articulate, and yet it's easy to understand. I mean, it's really an unusual subject. Many of you probably have never known about Asian ancient history, but you'll learn from it. And in fact, I was going to tell you that I'm very busy now, but if I had time, I would start to learn Chinese, isn't it? And I'm sure you speak Chinese. But
So I'm very stupid and I have trouble with languages, although I've been struggling with Chinese for a long time. But I will say this, that I fell in love with the historical inspiration for Mistress Miao, whose name was Yang Miao Jen, just like in the book. And Miao was her, I don't know, middle name or pet name or whatever. But I fell in love with her because I learned as a martial artist and martial arts teacher, I learned the system of spear work that she devised and that I describe in the book. And I would spend hours and honestly, Anita, to this day, and in fact, right before I came to meet you for this interview, I was spending 3 hours in the park with students visiting Boca Raton, practicing the spear that she developed. So when I realized that I was working on a martial arts system developed by a woman, and that woman had defeated with her little spear all the Mongols and huge warriors who came at her, and became so powerful and successful that she ended up ruling a good chunk of China, making her one of very, very handful of small number, maybe 3 women in Chinese history who've ruled like that. I sort of, became romantically fascinated with her. I thought she was really something. And I wanted to render her in a book, and I did that with Miao, and I showed her in the old days, and I showed what someone with her talents and proclivities
Oh, absolutely. She was the warrior woman, and the cover. Now, how did you find that picture? Or is that something you just looked? Is that what she looks like to you?
So, cover art for novels is always an intricate process. And we gave a few shots at this, and we decided that she and her own energy were such an essential part of the book. Sometimes books are about place, sometimes books are about an event, sometimes books are about a family. In this case, this book pivots around this one character. And of course, there are more characters, but without her, there is no
No,
glue to
no.
hold the whole thing together. So I thought, well, we should have her in some way on the cover. And green eyes in Asian people is a
Oh,
vanishingly rare thing. It only happens if, there's some mixed race thing going on. But in this case, I came up with another explanation for her beautiful green eyes. And of course, if you want to know what that is, you have to read the book.
right. Yeah, no, the green eyes, that was very interesting too, because that's what our lady in the first book had, green eyes. So
Right.
that was the tie in a sense. Okay. So, but I wanted to ask you about this. Now, I loved the movie Wonder Woman. Now, she was not Chinese, but she certainly represented a very powerful woman and what she could do. I was very happy. And the only sad thing that I was thinking is all of a sudden now people are against, they're hurting Asian people. I've been so horrified with that.
So, you brought up two things. The first thing about Wonder Woman, I will say that I love writing strong female characters. Um, Once in another book, I wrote a scene in which a young couple was traveling across country on a motorcycle. They stopped for a meal at a McDonald's, and the young woman went into the restroom and took a pregnancy test in the restroom, with like an EPT thing. And after the book was published, I received a letter from a fan sent to the publisher and forwarded to me. And this lady who wrote to me said, "I know your secret. I know that you are a woman writing as a man, and that you're writing as a man because no man
Right.
could ever write that scene that took place in the McDonald's and the pregnancy test in the
Interesting.
bathroom." So
No.
I always enjoy writing strong women characters, and Wonder Woman is one, and so is Mia. As far as the violence against Asian people, I don't have really much room in my mind or heart for any of this kind of bigotry, small
Yeah.
mindedness,
Right. Right.
hostility,
Yeah.
based in ignorance and fear.
Yeah.
And of course, someone who respects Asian cultures, and in particular, the Chinese history, compared to China, we are a little transient pipsqueak.
Yeah.
The United States and America have almost no history at all.
Right.
We've only been around a couple of hundred years. We are simple, simplistic, and shallow by comparison.
Yeah.
And I find very little in our pop culture or our own history that can compare to the 5,000 years of intricacy and richness that was and is China. So, notwithstanding an unacceptably authoritarian regime and a long history of that kind of thing, because they've always had emperors, which is what they have
Yeah.
now.
That's right.
That
So.
that element aside, there has been so much magnificent culture and
Yeah.
literature and music and science. Taoism that I follow, that philosophy is itself a science, that I've gotten lost in fascination and love for that over decades, and find very little else to compare, frankly.
Now, are you actually teaching this? You said that you still have your students, and that you're still teaching all this to them. Are you not?
I do. And now, COVID has made a dent in the
Yeah.
world and interrupted some, forward momentum for everyone in some way. But I've managed to maintain a school an active school here in Florida, to start a small one in Arizona where I live now, and to have followers and readers by the thousands around the world who are also interested in these things.
And I was going to ask you, I know Janelle's probably sitting there with you, but I wanted to ask you, so is Janelle, is she Mistress Miao?
Honey, the question was, are you Mistress Miao? In so far as she is a very strong and capable woman, yes, but she is not a serial killer or a spear
No, I
wielder.
know, but
So,
yeah, as
so
far
I
as the
will draw the
personality,
line
right?
there.
Right, but being married to you must be, it's wonderful for her, and I'm sure wonderful for you, because I know she is your partner in all that you're doing now, and it's quite nice, especially since, I guess, and she is your second wife.
I guess the wonder and pleasure is more on my part than on hers, I'm afraid.
Oh,
I'm
you're
not,
always
I'm
so
not
sweet.
I'm not a
You're always
picnic.
so sweet.
I am no picnic, I'll tell you.
Right. Oh, well, you have a beautiful smile. Your writing is fantastic. I feel so privileged to have been able to read it, and I'm looking forward, of course, to your next one. But I want to dwell on this again for the next time, and we've just run out of time. But I very much will have another interview next month. But I will then, of course, I didn't want to mix up one with the other. Your other is very different, and I'm not telling anybody yet. I have mentioned it, but as a matter of fact, I will. I did in the review, I said the next book is called Turtle Planet, which should be very interesting. But
Well, we'll have
this
lots to
one,
talk about with that one too.
yeah. So at the bottom of this book, it says, God does not play games of chance. Chance plays games of God. And that's quite a statement. So here we are. And it's I want to tell everybody that you can go to Amazon, of course, and get this. And it's called Mistress Miao, which we pronounce as meow, but Miao, and this is Monk Yun Rou. And that's Yunrou. So it's been a privilege. I must say, I know people are not used to actually a lot of the intellectualism that we heard today, but I love it. And I appreciate so much that you've taken the time and that you're a part of what we do. Monk, really, it's lovely.
Well, I'm honored by your fandom and your appreciation of my work. And I know that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but that's how it is.
But we'll
Hopefully,
make them your cup of tea.
we'll find more people who enjoy the story.
Cup of green tea, right?
That's right.
Okay, so I don't know how do we say goodbye in Chinese?
Sai Chen.
Okay.
Just say goodbye. That's fine.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, Anita. I
Thank
really
you very much, and we'll see you
appreciate your
back
work.
again. Yes, it's
I
wonderful.
look
Goodbye,
forward to it.
Chanel.